what in the heck does it mean to be married to yourself, and why in the world would anyone choose to do that? Well, I'm your host, Dr. Benjamin Alter, and this is the Alter Your Health podcast, and I happen to be married to myself. I actually haven't really stated that out in the open. I haven't shared that information with really anyone, but you're one of the first to know. I'm married with myself, and this is the Alter Your Health podcast, your source of information and inspiration to promote the holistic transformation of your health and the health of our planet. I'm so excited to be with you here and now. Thank you for tuning in. Wherever you are here. Yes, you are, and I do appreciate you for being here. So I'm excited to share with you this really fantastic conversation where we talk about self-marriage. Yes, we do. That is one of the things we discuss in this episode. But we also talk about habits and behavior change, because I think we all have habits or behaviors that we engage with that might be holding us back. They might be self-sabotaging us and restricting us from achieving our optimal health. Of course, maybe it's our diet, our exercise, drinking, smoking, things like that. And maybe it's also just the internal habits, internal dialogues that we might be having with ourselves, with myself. Yes, that is where I have room to grow and learn and heal. Internally with self-dialogue. I do have this voice that says, Ben, work harder, do more podcasts, be better, you're not worthy. These kind of things are kind of on the background most of the time, let's face it. But in the present moment, we're here together, and that's really what all that matters. So thank you again for tuning in. I'm really excited with this conversation with our guest, Dr. Erin Moore, who is a colleague, a fellow naturopathic physician, and we actually went to school together. While we didn't really cross paths all that much because she was a few years ahead of me, we did know one another on a very superficial level. And I am actually very grateful to have this opportunity to deepen in our connection together and get to know each other. And it turns out we've got a lot in common. We've both married ourselves. That's one thing that we have in common. And just kind of our philosophy and our approach to naturopathic medicine is also kind of unique, I think. So Dr. Erin Moore, like I said, is a naturopathic physician with a drugless private practice in Portland, Oregon. She works with patients to heal chronic disease through a dialogue that helps to identify the subconscious belief from the past that is associated with their current physical symptoms. She also teaches a course in self-marriage, like I said, and behavior change called Do It For You. I really love the name of that course because that's what it's all about. It's about doing this work, or whatever you want to call it. I don't like using the term work, by the way. I like using the term healing because work doesn't sound all that fun, and I want to have fun. So Do It For You, that's the name of the course, and it teaches a relationship with yourself as the driver of change. You might find her officiating self-marriages and speaking to audience about mind-body medicine and behavior change. She is also the executive director of Participate, a nonprofit that works to improve rural healthcare in remote regions of Nepal. We didn't get a chance to talk about that at all really on this episode. One of the favorite things that I took away from this episode is actually at the very end, the kind of wrapping up a process, a technique, a skill that allows us to just be more present with everything that you're doing. Anyways, I want to dive into this, but before we do, just a reminder, if it's your first time stopping through, or maybe you've been listening but you haven't yet rated or reviewed this episode, or this podcast rather, I would so appreciate if you just subscribe, rate, review, leave a comment, let me know what you think. And if this really resonates and you would like to share it with a loved one who you think might also benefit from hearing this kind of stuff, send that thing off in an email. I think you can press a button and off it goes to your friends, family, loved ones. So thank you so much again for tuning in, and enjoy this conversation with our guest, Dr. Erin Moore. Hello, Dr. Erin Moore, and welcome to the Alter Your Health podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. As we were just kind of reminiscing, we crossed each other's paths in the hallways maybe a few times while in naturopathic medical school at NU, and it was NCNM back then, right?
That's
But
right. Yeah.
now NUNM in Portland. And we kind of obviously have gone our own ways, doing our own thing, following
Mhm.
our own passions. And I'm so happy to connect here and kind of catch up
Yeah. And the internet brought us together.
as it can do.
Yeah.
So,
Mhm.
gosh, I would love to start by getting a little bit deeper in your backstory in terms of like what
Mhm.
pulled you into the profession of naturopathic medicine.
Hmm. Um, well, I was kind of brought up in a way that set me up with a head and a heart for medicine. So my dad's side of the family, they were more privileged, and there was a lot of doctors on that side. Both my grandparents were doctors, and then my dad is also a doctor. So I kind of had it planted in my head that that was possible for me. So I knew from a really young age that I wanted to be a doctor. And so, but they were all medical, like conventional medical doctors. And I also knew from a young age that I didn't want to be that kind of doctor. My
So why not?
Well, at first it was the hours that my dad worked. He was, yeah, he just was on call and working all the time, and I got from him that his work was very stressful. He was a pulmonologist back then, but now he's a hospitalist, which is a fascinating part of the medical system because basically his and my stepmother is also a hospitalist, and their specialty is in hospitalized patients. So basically in getting people that are in the hospital well enough to leave the hospital. And that's
Mhm.
it. So they
Yeah.
work in the ICU and admit patients from the ER. And so that's the kind of medicine that I was exposed to. And it just felt a little like uh, not as much nuance as I wanted, and maybe not as much depth of relationship between the patient and the doctor. I mean, of course, my dad and stepmom are wonderful people, and their patients love and respect them. But there was just like a piece missing to it that I knew that I was looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And you recognize that from a young age. That's
yeah,
pretty,
from high
yeah.
school.
Yeah.
Yeah, and my grandmother's actually Japanese, and so she introduced me to the idea of, that there was Eastern medicine, and there was other kinds of ways that people practiced. And so I thought I might do that. In college, I studied biochemistry, um, and but at the very end of college, I did a study abroad in China, thinking, and did like a kind of Chinese medicine situation that I set up for myself. And
Cool.
it was really cool. I learned a lot about it. And the most important thing I learned was that I didn't want to do it. That
So
wasn't
when,
it.
yeah, but when you were in undergrad, you had exposure to naturopathic medicine?
No. So
Oh,
I'd never heard of it. I was studying biochemistry kind of on the track to becoming a conventional medical doctor, because I didn't really know what else. I was just like, hoping that something would swerve me off my path. Like there was some other kind of doctor to be, but I just
yeah.
I didn't really know. And so I had Chinese medicine was the biggest, other thing that I was exposed to at the time. So I studied in China, and it was there. It didn't connect with me, Chinese medicine. Now I think it's way cooler than I thought it was back then. But anyway, while I was there, I remember I was kind of downtrodden, like, okay, I invested all this energy and time into studying here, and this isn't it. And so I went to this like smoky internet cafe back in the days when we had those. Now there's Wi-Fi everywhere. But I was in an internet cafe and just like internet searching. I don't even know how it happened, for something else. And I ran across naturopathic medicine.
Wow.
Yeah, just some integrative medicine clinic where there was a naturopathic doctor. And then I went down the rabbit hole and I was like, ding, that's it.
Cool. A web search while in China.
Yeah. Yep.
I love that. Yeah,
Hmm.
our backstories do kind of overlap a bit in the sense that we both had that calling for medicine and had no idea kind of what existed really
Hmm.
beyond what is conventionally known. And yeah, I didn't go to China for my web search, but
From the comfort
um,
of your own home.
yeah. But anyways, fast forward however many decade plus or whatever, and
Hmm.
here you are, a naturopathic doctor.
Hmm.
And I think the reason why we're having this conversation today is because we both kind of we're kind of alternative medicine practitioners.
Yeah.
We there we know that obviously there's this whole field of alternative medicine, but that has become very conventional in the sense that there's like
Hmm.
really guidelines on what it looks like and how it's practiced. And
Hmm.
you know there's encyclopedias that say like this herb for this condition and
This for that.
this for that. And
Hmm.
anyways, both of us have kind of, it seems like a draw to not that. So
Yeah.
so that's kind of why we're connecting. And so I want to learn more about your niche and kind of I don't really like using that term,
Hmm.
so I'm sorry, but like what kind of sets you apart from your other naturopathic colleagues at this point?
Hmm. Well, I, like you, don't prescribe. So I've heard you and Susanna before talk about how you really uh, prefer not to use supplements in your practice, or to prescribe them to patients. So I don't really do that either. Sometimes you guys have actually gotten me on board with the minerals. So I have introduced some trace minerals just for myself anyways. But
Mhm.
uh, yeah, that like when it comes down to it, that um, kind of nitty gritty, detailed, calculative sort of like this, yeah, this for that is just not so interesting to me. Um, so that's the main difference, I think, from the outset. I want to rewind for a sec because in school, there's another big piece that kind of led me to this position where I don't prescribe, or like a drugless practice is what I call mine, which is more a term like for traditional naturopaths used to use that. But so when even before I started school, I started working in Nepal. So in addition to being a doc, I'm also executive director of a nonprofit that does rural healthcare work in Nepal. So I started that in like 2009, which is about the same time that I started school. And I just fell in love with this community so much so that it was my intention, like my plan, to live there. So I went through the first part of school thinking that I was going to be a doctor in this village in Nepal. So I was always kind of orienting and kind of absorbing education, thinking that I would be in a low resource setting. So I never really intended to prescribe pharmaceuticals because I didn't think that I would have access to them. And then, so that kind of limited my, or I had a more focus anyway on things like manual medicine, like physical medicine that we learn with our hands, more counseling, education, and plant medicine and homeopathy made it into the ring for me also, because they have, of course, tons of plants there, and homeopathy is so cheap and small and easy to carry around. So those were the tools that I was developing in school. And then over time, I came to learn that I wanted to actually be based in America and just have my work in Nepal. Now I'm down to just a couple months a year I spend there.
Mhm.
And it'll probably, I think I'll maintain that clip with it. But it was through this kind of experience with Nepal that I really learned that it wasn't actually medicine that I was interested in, but healing, you know?
Mhm.
And
Mhm. Yeah.
then the because for me, I don't really have a lot of naturopaths, they have some story about their, you know, a healing or disease crisis, or they ran into something
In their
that,
own personal life, you mean?
right, yeah, that brought them to naturopathic medicine.
Well, there's another synchronicity between you and I. I've always felt like, man, I haven't really been through it like all these people.
Uh-huh.
Can't really, I mean, I am empathetic and can feel,
Yeah.
but I
Hmm.
feel like don't have that badge of I've been through my chronic illness and I can show you the way. But anyways, that's me.
No, that's so interesting, Ben, because
Yeah.
I think that may be important as to like why we're doing this kind of work instead,
Yeah.
because if we would have had that kind of crisis on our path and been rescued by the herb or the supplement or whatever, then we would have had a
We
lot
could
more
have been
faith in it,
really
you know?
attached to it. We could have developed that
Yeah.
attachment to some
Yeah. Or
sort
to
of
the diet or
outside
whatever.
fix. Yeah.
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 Yeah. So I didn't have that. And, but what gosh, all right. So instead, what kind of happened was more this, like looking at my lifestyle and my habits, like, cause I didn't have a disease, but I did suffer, like with my
Yes.
own,
Yes.
yeah, with my own addictions and self-harming behaviors that I did to myself and my patients also. And we talk about this so much in naturopathic medicine, like counseling on yeah, you got to exercise more, make sure you get in those greens and better quit smoking, it's bad for you. But like really getting into that, like I just found it to be this bottomless pit of like of healing opportunities. And like just it's so fascinating once you get down to what actually drives people to behave in the way that they do.
Yeah.
Because yeah, I found that it is often some belief or programming of the subconscious mind, and often related to our trauma from childhood. And so this work I found to be really powerful, working with myself and with patients just on habits, on these daily habits.
Yeah.
And I kind of I started like thinking about that in the early days of my practice. And then I met a doc who I've mentioned to you before, Dr. Moshe Daniel Block. And I saw him speak in 2014 for the first time, right when I was graduating. And he just like blew my mind right open, because I had already started to see the ways that we sabotaged ourselves and it showed up in our actions. But he teaches a technique called holistic counseling, where it becomes clear that in the same way our subconscious beliefs can sabotage our physiology also, and like the same wounds that are propelling us to, I don't know, to continue our bad habits, or that make it impossible for us to, like, introduce healthy habits, can also cause physical disease in the body,
Yes.
And so that was, then I haven't been able to like let go of that since. So those are kind of like my two main areas now, working with people to change their habits in a way that involves like really deep healing on their own part, and helping them to identify subconscious beliefs that are associated with their physical suffering today.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I really like that distinction you made about, we might not have a physical disease that is diagnosed or even physical symptoms, but that doesn't mean we're not suffering. And
Yeah.
I think that I've suffered,
Mm-hmm.
every human being has suffered.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really an important thing to realize, that we can, like, it helps us define health. Health, we know, is not just an absence of disease, but it's
Yeah.
freedom from suffering, or
Totally.
the ability, I love the idea that, sometimes pain is not an option. Sometimes we are going to experience pain, whether it's emotional pain from a grief, a
Mm-hmm.
passing of a loved one, or a heartbreak or whatever, or, if we fall down and break our leg, we're going to experience pain. But the
Mm-hmm.
suffering that goes along with that, really is up to us, and we have more power than we think in evading that
Mhm.
suffering and being more resilient emotionally, spiritually.
Mhm. Yeah. And even like my healing path has been, first of all, to be aware of where I am suffering, because we can just
Sure.
like move through life like
We can,
everything's
and
fine. Oh yeah,
yeah, we
totally
can
fine.
be in denial consciously or
Yeah.
subconsciously. And that's, that's a good place to be, maybe.
Oh,
But I feel,
yep. I remember those days when I was always
but
happy.
oh yeah. But I feel like once you see something, once you open your eyes to new way of thinking, new way of seeing, and the world is just different. You can't unsee that. You can't go back.
Hmm.
Have you had any moments in your life or any experiences that really opened your eyes to new ways of thinking about health, new ways of thinking about habits, or what have been some defining moments in that journey of yours?
Oh wow, that's a good question. Um, okay,
Don't
well,
think
I
too
feel,
hard.
yeah, what's coming up right now? I I said jokingly a minute ago, like, oh yeah, I remember that time when I was always happy. But I do remember that time, and it is distinctly different from now. So maybe I'll tell the story of how I like switched afterwards. But and it was in medical school. And in the very beginning, in the first couple of years, I had a close girlfriend. We always studied together, and that was kind of what I was like known for amongst my friends, like always being happy and positive and can't ever get me down, blah 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 blah. And and uh, and it occurred to me, like I don't know, I was having like deeper conversations and wanting to get to know myself more, and I realized that I had never really been angry. Like I got mad sometimes, but anger was not an emotion that I knew. I'd also like never let anybody break my heart. I never had my heart broken, and that was at like um in my in my late 20s. Yeah. So I I remember telling my girlfriend, like, I want to have my heart broken. She was like, "What?" And I said, yeah, like there's all these feelings that everybody else, I'm always like counseling people, you know, uh, and making them feel better. But I don't have these feelings. And I just kind of said there, I made a stand, like, I want to feel my feelings. and I, and I got a therapist and like told her the same thing. And it was like so awkward because I didn't have, I was like happy going to therapy and I
It
had no
reminds me,
problem.
it reminds me almost of preventative medicine. Like when someone comes to the doctor and they're well and they just want to stay well, it's like, I'm happy and I just want to stay happy, but I think I need to have my
Hmm.
heart broken in order
Hmm.
to do that. I think I need a colonoscopy or
Yeah. Yeah. So that was a really, I think, a kind of brave moment for me looking back because that the same friend, she told me, once you start, you can't stop, because she was like a kind of had more depth to her
once you start
emotion. Develop
what?
once you start to, feel your feelings.
Ah, yeah.
Because I was kind of living in a blissful ignorance, and in denial of the trauma of my past and of my own wounds, and like I'm
Yeah.
just going to be happy all the time and make people happy around me. But
Yeah.
I had never really dug deep into myself, and really gotten to know that how deep my feelings were and what they were connected
Yeah.
to. And she was very right. Once you start, you can't stop. Not for me anyways. So
Mm.
that was really
It's like
the
a bag of Pringles or whatever. Once you pop.
exactly. Once you pop, you can't stop.
Yeah, just like I said, once you kind of start seeing things, you can't turn your head on the truth, or the feeling that's like, yeah, the truth, I guess, for lack of a
Mhm.
better word. So
Mhm.
it sounds like you kind of had this more authentic experience of yourself through that.
Mhm. Yeah. And so all different kinds of ways for me to like I've gotten deeper into my feelings and my wounds of the past and all that, but just want to bring it full circle. Now, the way that I'm working on myself, with myself, and healing now is through my habits,
Yeah.
through really addressing the habits, especially with bad habits that I'm trying to break.
Let's talk about let's talk about habits. Let's
Okay.
talk about let's talk about bad habits. Like, I think we all know drinking, smoking, junk food, these
Mm-hmm.
kind of things are bad habits, quote, because they affect our experience physiologically, what's going on our insides. But when you're talking about habits, what are some of the habits that I trust that you're not drinking, smoking, and eating junk food. So,
Mm-hmm.
what is your junk food nowadays in terms of like, what are your bad habits that you're, correcting in your life?
Mm-hmm.
Where's that playing out for you?
So you're right. I'm not drinking, smoking, eating junk food, but I want to, and so I used to, I mean, I'm not drinking right now. I'm doing an elimination diet right now, which we could probably also talk for days about. But, so it's because of that. Like, so, I've been kind of sober curious. I'm calling it just, yeah, but I did used to smoke cigarettes, and, I am currently in this elimination diet at the face with, I don't know if a sugar addiction would be the right word, but with, using food emotionally. But I think the point is, it doesn't really matter what the habit is. It could be anything, because for me and for so many people that I work with, it's all of the addictions are trying to soothe the same wound. So you get rid of one, so you quit drinking, then you start smoking. You quit smoking, and then you start overeating. You quit overeating, and then you start like biting your
Instagram.
nails, and then you start social media. You're addicted to social media,
Yeah.
But there's what all of these have in common is that they are soothing us. They're like a balm on our wound, or they quiet maybe a piece of the mind that we don't want to listen to, so then that's the work, so.
Yeah, I really love that. One of my favorite kind of phrases, and I don't know who said it or whatever, but the alcohol, the drugs, the food, the whatever the subject of the addiction is not the problem. It's the answer to the problem. It's the
Yeah.
solution that we have at hand to, heal, or provide at least a little bit of, not
Mhm.
heal, but provide a little symptom resolution with regard to that wound.
Yes, and I think
So
that's a really good
yeah,
point,
yeah. So
because
what's the
people,
wound? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I just want to highlight
Yeah.
what you just said there, because people want to beat themselves up all the time. Like, these habits, bad habits, go hand in hand with guilt and shame. And what I have to remind myself, and I remind my patients and my people all the time, is that this is you taking care of yourself. You've built this habit because it was with the resources that you had and everything that you knew. This was your way to soothe yourself, to take care of and to honor that in ourselves, that it's still the body trying to heal, but we just, as we grow and evolve, we have more resources, and then, it gets trickier the more you know.
Exactly. It's so true. I love that you said that. It's the body trying to heal. So our cravings, our addictions, our smoking, our drinking, our drugs is the body
Mm-hmm.
trying to heal itself.
In a way, yeah.
It's our soul trying to feel good.
Yeah, to
And
be okay, to be safe, to be comfortable, and a lot of this, I think, is uh, I would like to blame on the brain, because the brain is just an organ that's trying to conserve energy and keep us alive, right? And so these habits have become like subconscious or habitual patterns in our brain. So they're like hardwired, well-worn pathways,
yeah,
and so
well,
once we
I don't, that's where I feel like I've got a different,
Mm.
I feel like the brain is just some computer, you know? And so you're saying that this computer that we have gets programmed, and the program is kind of faulty or outdated, and it's a problem with the programming in our computer.
Well, when we want to break a habit, we have to rewire pathways in the brain. Like there are um, in the like limbic, the structures of the brain, without any conscious intervention. So it barely uses any of the our unconscious behaviors, which habits are repeated, automated, often unconscious behaviors. But of course, they have neural correlates. Like for these actions to happen, they're like a nervous signal must travel in the brain, and they just don't involve much of our cortex. They don't involve for us to think very much. So if we want to break that habit, we have to break that pathway. We kind of have to, make a new pathway, basically.
Yeah. I definitely understand that, physiologically and neurologically and everything. And I'm always struck by the examples in our world of the people who have these really long-standing, really bad self-destructive habits, patterns, and then they just have like a wake-up call, and it's like everything is different. That's no longer an issue.
Mm-hmm.
Whether
Mm-hmm.
that wake-up call just comes in a meditation, whether it comes in with a diagnosis, whether it comes with the passing of a loved one or a near-death experience. But like there are these kind of exceptions, I guess I'm trying to say, to that rule of kind of rewiring. And I'm always intrigued by those exceptions to that, like in the moment wake up.
Yes. So that is all right. So I told you earlier, I studied biochemistry in college, and this has been like my comfort zone science for a long time. And just recently, like in the last 6 months, I've started to really be like pressed up against the limits of this science. And like what you're just describing there, these like spontaneous healings, or all of a sudden like this terribly addictive habit no longer serves me and I never want it again. These cannot be explained with biochemistry, or not to any satisfactory degree anyhow. I think that these kind of things are explained by quantum physics, like by quantum science, and which I've just started to like dig into. But I do think that of course that's possible. I mean, it's been documented again and again, these kind of like awakenings. I know we're talking about addictions and habitual stuff. Like you can just, it's possible to just, I don't know,
Transcend it in the moment.
to instantaneously rewire the brain or to shift into a new state. I totally like that's possible, but how exactly that happens, let's talk about that later, because I don't know. But of course it happens. I would love to become a master of that. It'd be a lot easier.
Man, I feel like you are even more left-brained than I am.
Yeah.
Because like I certainly am and have been for my life. But there's sometimes where you were talking about kind of like pushing up against the limits. I'm just like, it's God, it's spirit, it's the universe, it's unexplainable. And I love hearing you say, well, there's got to be an explanation. It's quantum. Let's figure it out. And I of course we need you to help us figure it out. But I guess what I'm trying to say is I am totally okay in the unknown, in the unknowing. Anyways, I'm curious, we're talking about habits and patterns and addictions, and we're talking about how these behaviors that we engage with are not the problem, but the solution to the problem. So what's the wound? What's the problem that you feel like, maybe you can speak personally if you'd like, or what do you think that people are commonly trying to heal with their addictions?
Almost always it's childhood trauma, and when I say the word trauma, I don't mean abuse or like outright neglect, but often it's just emotional trauma, that we've kind of taken in something that is painful, that is not true, to be true. So, well, for me, or like, and often with the actual problem of this emotional trauma, subconscious belief from our childhood is not the actual trauma itself, but either what we hold to be true now in the world, like often things, that I have to, for example, I have to work hard in order to be loved. I see that a lot. People are just like this. I think that drives a lot of this like go behavior, always having to accomplish something.
Worthiness kind of
A
stuff.
lot of worthy and enoughness sort of things. It can be more like intellectual thinky things like that, or feeling things. Like for me, it's more, or at least where I'm working now, is just I have a lot of stored, going back to like remember when I said when I wanted to get my heart broken and learn how to be angry. Like anger is just now happening for me, like in the last few months.
Cheers.
Yeah.
Welcome to the club. I've been in the angry club since like day one of my life.
Oh yeah.
I've kind of, well, it's funny that I'm like laughing and smiling and joking at it, but yeah, I've kind of tended more towards like, temper tantrums.
Yeah.
But
We do have a lot in common.
Yeah.
You and me and the rest of the world.
Yeah.
So,
It is so interesting, this unworthiness issue. It's like conceptually, I really understand it. I understand, and still there's, we're talking about business a little bit earlier before we started recording. There's this voice that's like, when you do this, then you'll feel this, when you accomplish this, when you reach this, then, when and then. And, I conceptually know how ridiculous that is, and that's not how life works. And still it's there. It's like,
so it's the same thing with our healing and our patience. It's a lot of if I do this, then I'll be lovable. If I exceed in this way, if I look this way, then I will be worthy. Then I deserve love. A lot of conditions on our like wholeness and just beingness, when there really are no conditions, right? So it's like a constant relearning of that. But to speak to our anger, because I know there's a lot of people have this too, because anger is not really it's not a societally accepted emotion.
Yep.
But so for me, all right, so I'll when I used to smoke or drink or overeat or anything, like I've come to see now that there's a feeling, like a feeling associated with it. And I've started to ask patients and friends about this, and invite your listeners to consider this also. Before you reach for the thing that you're addicted to, like pay attention to what happens in your body. Like just pause for a second. And that's actually like the hardest thing, is the pause.
But if you can pause, you're 95, 99% there. Yeah.
Just one beat, which is why mindfulness is so important in this work. Yeah. But if you can just pause for 1 second and notice what's in your body, that is the wound right there. That's the entry point, So I've heard it described in lots of ways, totally different for every person. For me, it feels like a tornado of chaos in my chest, and that's when I let it come to its like fullness. It feels like that, like restlessness that I just that I gotta silence. I can't be with that.
Yeah.
So then the more it's kind of a matter, working with myself, what can I do? What do I need? But in that, like in the last layers of it anyway, is anger. So for me, that's where I'm at in my own healing journey now, which has become clear to me in the last like couple weeks, actually, saying that I don't have my own like healing crisis or story to tell. Like, I think it's happening now, so I'll tell about it later. But
Touché.
yeah, and forever, right? And on,
Yeah.
we always have more healing to do. But
Yeah.
for me, what I can say is this feeling that that I want to soothe and quiet with all the substances and activities that I know are harmful for me, in that is stuck emotion that I didn't get to express, it's all from my primary trauma as a kid.
Mm.
Um,
So I'm curious, I want to go back to that pause that
yeah.
is so difficult. And I know exactly, like, I can feel that. And I want to spend a moment there, and maybe it would be helpful for some listeners as well, to just consider what happens in that pause. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you pause, and then what? Do you pause and then you reach for the drink or the cigarette, or you pause and then is there an action with the pause, or is it just
Mm-hmm.
like pause long enough to let that wave of whatever pass, and then it's like, okay, I feeling grounded again? So can you share a little bit about maybe your experience or how you
Mm-hmm.
might coach people in that pause?
Yeah. Okay. Any and all of those things, and
Yeah.
dependent on the moment and your like level of skill in working with yourself, which I should plug. This is what I like teach in my class. Do it for you. Yeah, I have a class that I like built
We'll get
around this.
there.
All right. Okay. But if so, the primary practice in those moments is of self-kindness. Whatever you can, the pause itself is an act of kindness towards yourself. Like checking in, asking yourself how you feel, like what is happening, is a profound act of kindness towards yourself. So if you can even do that, then you've done some healing work,
Mhm.
and then after, the longer that you can stay, there's a couple different things that I teach. Investigation into that really
Mhm.
would be the next thing. Recognizing it, step one, and then kind of looking closer into it. If not, uh, well, let's just for beginners, where is it? Like being able to name where it is in your body. Like, is it like a clenching in your stomach? Is there a contraction, or is it, a tightness in your jaw or in your neck? Do your shoulders rise? Like, or do you have the chaos tornado like me, or whatever it is? Like really naming it, and then asking of you, like, what does it need? What do you need? And then often we can offer that. I'm like saying this, I've got like my hands on my chest right now. Like with our hands, we can, just offer like loving and kindness to that part of our body, where there is tension and suffering and chaos or whatever. And then with words of kindness to ourselves, maybe it needs acceptance or just love. I love you. I forgive you. This is okay. This is what is right now. This is where we're at. I accept you no matter what happens next. That's a good one, because often, it takes some time to work through that and build up the strength to say no, because sometimes you got to just have the cigarette, because unless we can do this like spontaneous awakening thing, which I'll keep you posted on, but being able to love and accept yourself regardless of the action is huge. Yeah.
Yeah, for me, that that feels like the starting point.
Mm-hmm.
Is just the I talk a lot about destigmatizing things, destigmatizing our own behaviors, our own actions, because as long as what we're doing is wrong, as long as we have that kind of way of thinking about it, our food, our, you know, our diet, our exercise, our smoking, our drinking, whatever it is, as long as it's wrong, then we've got this kind of layer of icky, mucky sewage that we have to wade through and out of each time we dip into that behavior. And I remember, I used to say that, what's worse than, drinking a milkshake or eating a large fry from McDonald's or whatever. Really, what's worse than that is doing that and also beating yourself up for it. There are the 95-year-old grandmas that have their cigarettes and milkshakes every day, and they are not beating themselves up, and they are in a state of at least mental wellness. They might not be optimally physically well, but our health is not just our cholesterol numbers and our hormone balancing and stuff like that.
Right. Yeah. I think that's really important what you said there. In Buddhism, they call this second arrow. Are you familiar? Yeah. Or just like that, another layer of, it's like the pain, but we don't need the suffering. Like the suffering is optional, like that we beat ourselves up on top of, like that's where the guilt and the shame come in. And then really that just kind of pushes us even further down the path, because if we're like,
deepens the wound.
We're mired in shame, then what are we going to do to cope? The one thing we know how to do, smoke that cigarette, It
just deepens the wound and makes us need our balm that we have access to that much more.
Yeah. So then, like what we were saying earlier, like recognizing that is caring for ourselves, even though like now we're like, that was the way that we learned to care for ourselves. And, even now I'm doing the best that I can,
That is such a key take home, I think, for everybody, is to know that, we always can look back and say, oh, I should have done this. I could have done this. I shouldn't have had that. I shouldn't have eaten that. But we always are actually 100% of the time doing our best. Just like our bodies we always are 100% of the time healing. It's the same thing. We're always doing our best. We're always healing. And certainly we can look back and say, oh yeah, I should have done that. And it's really, we're experts at looking back and criticizing ourselves in our life. But that doesn't get us anywhere. That digs the wounds deeper.
Yeah. I like to offer just a shift in perspective there, like that our wounds and our air quote mistakes, these are our opportunities to evolve and to heal.
Correct.
And really I encourage people to just dive in, because this is our purpose here, I believe, to heal our wounds. And what you said earlier, health is freedom from suffering. The more we heal our wounds, the more we face the quote mistakes we made in the past, the more free we become. And that's what I want for me and for you and for everybody. Freedom.
Totally. And we all want the easy way to freedom. We all want the pill that is freedom encapsulated, and still not make good books. But that the freedom, just like courage comes through acting courageously, freedom comes through freeing yourself in those through, from those whatever. It's not something that we just get. We live it. We live into it.
We get to live it, and nobody else can do it. No, there's not going to be a pill. Nobody can do this for us but ourselves.
Nope.
And I hope that's not like a like a death sentence, but like I don't know, more like a battle cry, or it feels so empowering to me. Like, we can do this. We are the only
It's
ones that can.
exciting.
This is our job.
Yeah, we certainly
Yeah.
can relate to it in kind of an enthusiastic, lighthearted way. Even
Yeah.
obviously, we know that some people are really struggling and really suffering, but just having that slight perspective shift can be helpful. So I want to
Mm-hmm.
get into the self-marriage stuff. And you've got the course online that's called Do It, or it's not online yet.
It's not
It's in
online yet.
person.
I'm in Portland, so it's a
Yeah.
Portland-based class now, but I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna offer it online in February next year. Mm-hmm.
Cool. So it's
Yeah.
called Do It For You. I really love
Yeah.
the name, and I also love self-marriage. I've actually self-married myself.
Really?
I was in some sort of ceremony that they that was called a self-marriage, and
Ah.
it was let's see, probably about 8 or 9 years ago.
Mm.
And so yeah, I remember that. I remember connecting with myself on that intimate level. I'm you know, I'm sure everyone has a unique experience in their self-marriage, but I
Ben,
love,
so few people have
yeah.
this experience. You are literally, besides the people that I was in like the original ceremony with when I married myself about a decade ago at Burning Man, I haven't met anybody else that's done it.
Well, the synchronicities and commonalities just get
Hmm.
deeper and deeper, I guess. I'm also married to myself
Well,
as well.
congratulations.
And so I kind of personally have a feeling, at least, of what comes through that, but I'd love to hear more of how you describe what it means to get married to yourself.
Mhm. Well, it is based on the concept of traditional marriage between two separate people, right? And the process, at least the way that I've experienced it, and then the way that I share it with others, is really to identify, kind of starting with that traditional two separate people relationship. What is it that you want in a partner? What is it that you're looking for? Not like tall, dark, and handsome, but to support me and to make me laugh when I'm down, and to be my biggest cheerleader, and be a shoulder to cry on, or whatever it is people are always that they want in a relationship. And then the work is to learn how to cultivate that within yourself, to know how to look to yourself for those things, for respect, and for support, for encouragement, and for a pick me up, and or whatever it is, like that we can provide these things for ourselves. And that work is one and the same with the work of healing that we've been talking about. um, but and then in the process, or let's say in the ceremony of self-marriage, which is kind of the end of my class for Do It For You, then the participants, whoever decides that they want to make the commitment official, will write vows, as if you would write vows to a partner, but they write vows and commit to themselves. And it's different for every person, just like it's different for every marriage. But really, in the end, it's just a commitment to being there for yourself in the way that you most need. Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
love that. And I've glanced over your I guess curriculum on your website for the
Mm-hmm.
in-person thing, and I'll just read through it for the audience, and then I want to talk
Mm-hmm.
about a couple of the weeks that kind of jump out at me. But the first
Okay.
week is orientation, and then mindfulness, self-communication, self-trust, self-kindness, self-forgiveness, self-commitment, self-honesty, self-respect, self-joy, self-acceptance, and self-marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And that seems like just a really wonderful journey. And
Yeah.
in reading through those, for me, the thing that kind of jumps off of the screen is self-joy. And like I've kind of heard to some degree all of the other phrases in some way or another, but what is self-joy? I want to kind of just hear what you have to say about that a little bit more.
That is actually, yeah, it's towards the end of the curriculum, and a really important one, because as you know, this work of healing and development we get very like serious about it, and I think that's not what we're put here. I think we're like being joyful and enjoying our time here is like part of the point, why not? So in that class, the main teaching that we go over are the different kinds of joy from a Buddhist perspective. So that's kind of my background also. I mean, I'm not like a practicing Buddhist or anything, but that's been the philosophy that I've learned the most from. So there's a lot of like Buddhist philosophy throughout the course. But in Buddhism, they talk about two different kinds of joy, sukha and pamoja. Pamoja is is like worldly joy, the joy that you get from the outside, that you get because of conditions, because you aced the test, or scored the new job or whatever. And then sukha is internally generated joy, like joy without cause. And so
that's what self-joy is.
Yeah. So then really a lot of this class is really about, I find myself coming back to the same point again and again, which I've heard you come back to again and again on your podcast, which is really just presence in the moment and acceptance. There's no, I mean, really that's the answer in the end, is like having, being able to be with what's here, and if you, in terms of like sukha, like there's not, and this joy, this internally generated joy without cause, we can be in situations that are challenging, and it's not saying that we always have to have like a smile on our face, but with this kind of acceptance of the way that of what is happening right now, and the reality of your situation, then you have some like freedom to, maybe not feel so taxed about it, like, okay, this is what's happening, and not get so sucked into, but I should be further along than this, and this thing I just did was bad, and, or all the judgments around it, having a little more by like acceptance and presence in the moment, then you can like be freed up to lighten up a little bit. And then in the class, we do talk about like actually making our behaviors, injecting some joy into them, with the more artistic and creative capacities of ourselves, like really getting out of our heads, a little bit, and more into like our hearts and our bodies, and music and art and dance and things like that.
Well, thanks for elaborating a little bit. I think it's just really important. What I'm realizing and hearing you share a little bit more is just distinguishing the inner joy. I forget the Buddhist terms, but the inner joy from the outer joy. They're different. They're different. And we get tangled up thinking that they're the same. And I think that, what I'm taking away just in this conversation is just really acknowledging the distinct difference between those two different kinds of joys. And I mean, they bring different feelings in the body even. Like, it's kind of funny that they're both called joy.
Yeah, and both very important too. Like we shouldn't hate on the outward joy, because that's like super important, right? To make it, the more we have of that, the more like being joyful is a habit for us,
Yeah. I've heard a lot of people say that, joy is my natural state. And, and I've heard people say that joy is kind of the natural state for all of humans. And for a long time, and really still now, I don't really fully believe that to be true for myself. So I think that's why the self joy jumped off of the screen.
Mm-hmm.
And I definitely, that's part of my journey. I guess that's what I'm trying to
Yeah.
say.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So thank you. And I just love so if I'm understanding this self-marriage course, which is called Do It For You, I really love that.
Mm-hmm.
It is kind of like the treatment, quote unquote, for habits, addictions, behavior change.
Yeah. So I actually started, so this course, I've got like a vision. Eventually, I want to be, for most of my business, to be online and to offer multiple courses. And this is like the first course, that I want people to take, because it is, we do work on a behavior. Like in the course, we choose one behavior to kind of observe and watch how it changes over time, like the behavior we most want to quit through, and we can use this self-marriage course as the way to do that. But yeah, like having the skill to work with yourself, to be your number one ally, is, like, as far as I know, the best way to change any behavior. So we can, track our behaviors and willpower to change this and that until the cows come home. But this, I think, is investing some time in learning how to love and support yourself, and learning some new skills to support a change in your life, to help you make it through it. I think is a much more effective way to bring about change. This is what I've learned so far, and this is what I want to share anyhow. Mm-hmm.
Great. And I'm glad that you are. I've always known that willpower only carries us so far. Some
Mm-hmm.
people have willpower to carry them a day or a month or a year, or maybe
Mm-hmm.
even like a decade. But
Mm-hmm.
if there's still a wound, there's still a wound.
Yeah, it's
Um,
going to come up in some other way. There will be another
yeah.
way to cope with it, unless we learn to soothe ourselves.
Yeah. So it sounds like, in summary, what I'm kind of gathering from this whole conversation, we started by talking about kind of like this, like what it is that you do, what kind of like is unique and about you. And, because we're kind of alternative medicine practitioners. And, what the word that is coming to me, which is one that I use a lot, is just like realizing a sense of wholeness, and realizing, kind of integrating kind of everything into the feeling and the being present with one's wholeness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. That's beautiful. That's what it's all about. Yeah.
It
And
is what it's all about.
yeah, it's like, I know in most all moments intellectually that I am a like whole and complete being, but I need to like work. My work is to remember that, and to be able to feel that,
Mhm.
to know to know it in more than just my mind, but to know it in my body and my heart. And so yeah,
Yeah.
that's the work of healing. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And thanks for pointing out the subtle nuance of intellectually understanding that. I think, we can all walk
Mm-hmm.
away from this conversation and be like, okay, yeah, I am, divinely whole, perfect,
Mm-hmm.
and then having that experience and that palpable feeling that you're able to carry in your life. And
Mm-hmm.
it's such a big difference. And I personally need to remind myself to step away from the kind of objective, this kind of, enlightenment kind of like objective. And
Mm-hmm.
it's not about the outcome, right? It's not about the destination. We're talking about this journey of wholeness. Wholeness is not an outcome that we are going to achieve after we take your 12-week course or anything
Mm-hmm.
else. It's a process. It's a way of living.
Mm-hmm.
And I constantly need to remind myself to remember that, and bring that into kind of the struggles, or the times that I forget.
Yeah. Yeah. Me too.
Cool.
I think all of
We're the
us.
same there too.
Yeah.
So given that, we'll wait patiently until this course is available online in
Mhm.
February of 2020, which seems
Mhm.
like a long way away, but it's
I
really not.
know. We'll be here in no
Um,
time.
so given that we don't all have access to it here and now, I'm kind of would like to wrap up with maybe some kind of takeaways, or kind of if you could impart the teachings or the learnings from this 12-week program on behavioral change and self-marriage, like how would you kind of summarize it and encapsulate it for us to kind of take in a wave of good feeling, goodness?
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you asked me that. I could have asked you to ask me that. That was perfect. Because I do have something that I want to share with you and your listeners. And it's a practice that I teach throughout the course that I think is the most important one. And it will help us to practice kindness towards ourselves and also mindfulness in a way that we don't have to set aside any time at all for. We can do it when we're doing anything. It's called undercover kindness. So
Like it.
basically there's three components. You can do it, anyone that's listening now can do it when they're driving or cooking or excuse me, folding laundry or anything. But three components. First is in your body, and the practice is just to be mindful in your body, like be aware of how you're holding yourself and hold yourself in a way that makes you feel however you want to feel, strong, powerful, beautiful, whatever, like in a healthful way. Okay. And then just being aware of how you move. So this practice I found really helpful, being mindful in your bodies. It's so much easier of a practice than meditation. Like just be aware of how you're moving. And then the second part is in your breath. And I learned this from my teacher, Charlie Cropley, who I've also encouraged you to get on this show. He's amazing.
He's
On the list.
coming someday. Yeah.
And he likes to say, imbue your breath with kindness. So then we can do it now just with like nice deep breaths, like letting imagine your breath saturated with kindness and let it reach, all the nooks and crannies of your body or wherever it needs to go. And you can even do that just with shallow breathing also, once you practice it, but just imagining with, that wherever your breath touches, which can be anywhere, you're bringing yourself kindness. And then the last part is through your hands. Like right now, kind of, if you just pay attention to how your hands feel, not together, but on their own, maybe there's like a little tingle or something. And you imagine that's kindness coming through your hands. And then you can offer it to yourself, either, if you're driving, you can just like place a hand on your thigh, or offer kindness through the wheels. And then so often, like be kind to that steering wheel. Or like loosening your grip on whatever you're holding on to, or placing a hand on your belly.
Or get a grip. I'm just kidding.
But these three pieces, you can, it's easiest to do when you're doing like mundane tasks, like chopping vegetables, or if you have like a repetitive job, it's really a nice practice. Or folding laundry, cleaning, just breathing kindness, being mindful in your body, and offering yourself kindness through your hands. That's it. Yeah. And like this practice, so simple, doesn't take any time. If you do it when it's easy, then you can offer it to yourself when it's hard. Like when you find yourself revving up to like get in a fight, that's happened to me a couple times now. Because it's become such a practice, I'm like, oh yeah, and I can, just place my hand, even if it's on my hip, I know I'm being kind to myself, and the way I stand, So people, undercover kindness, try it out. Mm-hmm.
That is so great. I love that so much. And I love how practical it is, and there's no excuses.
Mm-hmm.
But and when we forget that we have that beautiful, amazingly accessible tool, when we forget, we can remember and then offer ourselves kindness for forgetting.
Yeah, it's a win-win.
It's a win-win. Because, I mean, obviously we could walk around 100% of our waking hours in this state with this connection, but maybe we'll forget. Let's just say
Yeah,
that
maybe
yeah,
it might.
maybe, yeah, we'll let you off the hook. Yeah.
Good opportunity to practice self-forgiveness.
There you go. Well, this has been a fantastic conversation, and I'm glad to know more deeply what it is that you do. How, because I also kind of work, I guess most lifestyle medicine practitioners work with behavior change. And, we all have our unique flavors and ways of approaching what really means living a healthier life. And it's good to have some new tools, new ideas, new insights into how we can do that together.
Yeah, such a pleasure. I really enjoyed this conversation also. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so for people to learn more about, obviously people in Portland can look you up on your website. And for people to learn more about the course that's coming in February, where can we find you?
I'm on all the social medias, maybe not all of them, but I'm on Instagram and Facebook at Dr. Erin Moore. It's DrErinMoore. That's my website also. And come follow along. On my website, I actually have, you can download like an audio recording, like instructions for Undercover Kindness, and then get added to my email list. And I send out an email every other Monday with a new blog and whatever's inspiring me or making me laugh, and some latest news from the mind body medicine world.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time, Erin. Thanks, listeners out there, for tuning in. Certainly go and get more information at drerinmoore.com. And peace and love. And until next time.